Okay. All right, Boker Tov. Today's daf is Lamed Hey, 35, and we pick up actually at the top of Lamed Hey. Let me review what we said yesterday. We sort of, I think, was a little bit rushed at the end, and I wanted to clarify a point. The Mishnah says, went from halachic sort of barriers to getting the Eruv to physical ones, or they might also be halachic ones, as we'll see. And it said that if you put an Eruv in a migdal, which here means like a wardrobe, is how I'm describing it, is some type of a wooden chest is normally what it is. And you don't have the key, and the Tanakama says it's fine, and Rabbi Eliezer says it's not good. So what is that about? So the Gemara wants to know why Rabbi Eliezer says it's good. I mean, if you don't have the key, what's the story? How can you get to it on Shabbos? Presumably you can't break it, although we'll talk about that in a minute. So first it made it a special case that it was something made out of laid bricks without cement, where according to one position, it actually is not a violation to undo that structure of bricks. But then the Gemara got to sort of challenge that, because even that position was only on Yantiv. So the Gemara tried to say, fine, the case of the Mishnah is talking about Yantiv. That was answer number one. Now within that, the Gemara quoted another issue, a braita of Rabbi Eliezer, that said that it matters where the key was lost. That even when Rabbi Eliezer says it's no good, assuming there's not a possibility, you might be able to find the key and open it. But if there is a possibility you could find the key and open it, you're okay. So you don't have to actually have found the key, there just has to be that possibility. So what would that scenario be if it was lost in the city, and then assuming that there were a lot of Rishus HaYachids, and somehow all those Rishus HaYachids could get you out to where your Eruv is, that in theory, were you to find the key, you could get it to where your Eruv was and you're okay. But if it's lost out in the field, then there's no way even if you found it, so it's not good. So that basically, the chiddush there is, well, first of all, the Gemara says that makes it clear we're talking about Shabbos, not Yantiv, because there's an issue of carrying. But the chiddush there also is that even if you didn't find the key, just the ability to find the key for Rabbi Eliezer would change the story. So if there's not if the key is like completely lost, whatever, there's no chance you'll find it, or it's lost in the field, then that's where Rabbi Eliezer says it's a problem. But if there's a possibility you could find the key and get it there, it's okay. Now, I wanted to mention something, because the second Braita said, or the way the Gemara interpreted the Braita, rather than saying where was it lost, said where did you find it? Did you find it in the city? Did you find it in the field? And Rashi says you found it on Shabbos, presumably because if you found it before Shabbos, that wouldn't be the scenario that Shabbos began and you didn't have the key, which is the scenario. So the question is, who cares if you found it on Shabbos? An Eruv is defined by what happens when Shabbos begins. And I look to see the Rishonim and the Rishonim, they really don't discuss it, but I think they're assuming that the point about describing when you found it is because that shows where you lost it. Meaning, if you found it in the city, then that shows that on Erev Shabbos it was lost in the city. And if you found it in the field, then that shows that on Erev Shabbos it was lost in the field. But they basically downplay the point about you need to find it, and they basically assume that it is, as the first Braita discussed for Rabbi Eliezer, the question about where you lost it, and defined by the status when Shabbos began. So let's take a look. Let's just further finish that up in the Gemara, and then I'll take the question. So if you look here on Lamed Hey and Aleph, we pick up with let's start from the very first line of Lamed Hey and Aleph and review that. V'hachi ktani. So this is how to read this Braita that we quoted yesterday. Nosno b'migdal v'nal b'fanav v'avra maftech. You put it in this wardrobe, you locked it, and then you lost the key. Areza Eruv. It's good. Now that is the chacham. B'medvar mamurim. Now, when is this true that it's good? B'yom tov. That's good on Yom Tov, because on Yom Tov, wherever you find the key. Now, of course, who's to say that you'll be able to find it? But if you were to find the key, you could get it, and therefore get access. Aval b'Shabbos. Ein Eruv o Eruv, but on Shabbos it would not be good. Now, Nimsa HaMaftech, if it was found, Bein Be'ir, Bein B'Sodeh, Ein Eruv o Eruv, whether in the field or whether in the city, it would not be good. So according to this Braita, as opposed to our Mishnah, where the Chachamim say flat out, Hareza Eruv, it's good. 1 minute. Right. According to our Mishnah, where it says flat out that it is good, this Breita has the Tanakama saying that fundamentally it's not good, unless it's Yontiv, and then if you found it, you could get it to it. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, and here Rabbi Eliezer makes a distinction. Eruv be'ir, eruv eruv. I'm sorry, did I skip a line? Rabbi Eliezer Omer, be'ir eruva eruv. If you found it in the city, which means it was lost in the city, then it is good, because then you could have gotten it to the wardrobe. But sadeh, if it was found in the field, which therefore means it was lost in the field, ein eruva eruv, it's not good, because therefore there was no way to have gotten it there when Shabbos began. Now we're going to explain that. Be'ir eruva eruv to Rabbi Shimon. In the city, it's good, like Rabbi Shimon. The Amar Echad Gagos ve'Echad Chatzeres ve'Echad Karfifos Rishus Achas Hein l'Kelim Shishav B'Tochan, and this is what I discussed at the end of yesterday. That even though the way to get it to the Eruv would require going from one Rishus HaYachid to another, and they would be different types of Rishus HaYachid. You might have to take it from a walled-in yard to a roof, and to that to a walled-in field. Nevertheless, he says that all of those, if something began Shabbos there, as opposed to beginning in the house, which is considered a distinct Rishus, but if it began Shabbos in one of those spaces, you can carry from one to the other. So so in theory you could get it by going through different Rishos HaYachids. But so therefore it would be considered theoretically that you could have opened it, because you could have found it and could have gotten it there. Could have gotten the key there. But Basada, Ein Eruvo Eruv, in the field it's not good, Kirabanan, like the rabbis who say basically that fundamentally that fundamentally if you don't have the key and can't get the key there, then it is not going to count. Some take out the word Rabbanan, because what Rabbanan are we talking about? But anyway, that is basically the point. So there basically are three positions. There's the position of the Tanakama, the Mishnah, that even if the key has no chance of being found, or it's only in the field or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's still good. Why? Because as Gemara said, it would be talking that that would be, according to this answer, that would be only on Yantav, and only in a case of bricks, because then theoretically you could undo it. But taking away those special cases, if it's not a case of bricks or it's not Yantav, then the Tanakama's position basically would be it's completely not good. That they only allowed it in that special case of bricks on Yantav. And then Rabbi Eliezer says, actually, this is ironic, because in the Mishnah Rabbi Eliezer is strict, but according to this, Rabbi Eliezer is being lenient. And Rabbi Eliezer actually says, actually, even forgetting the special case of bricks on Yantav, it would be good if the key is lost in the city, and it would be theoretically possible to find it and get it there. The only case it wouldn't be good is if the key is lost in the field. Yes, Michael?
Two questions. One is, when it says Ninsa HaMafteach, what is that adding exactly?
So that's why I said, I could not find really much discussion around the Nimtza. I think the Nimtza is just making it clear where the key was lost. So if it was found in the city, it clearly was lost in the city. If it was found in the field, it was lost in the field. That's how I believe that's being understood. Yeah.
Just to finish up, so I want to understand. Let's say I know exactly where the key is.
Right.
But I can't get to it. Does
Right.
that make a difference?
Then it wouldn't be any different than that you didn't know where the key was, It is funny that the Gemara is assuming that you're allowed to say, well, in theory I could have found the key, and that counts. Unless the idea of saying Nimtzah, and again, I didn't find a discussion about this in the Rishonim, but I didn't spend too much time looking, but the little I did look, unless you could have said an idea that it's like Yesh Breira, that because I found it on Shabbos, it shows that even Erev Shabbos, it was going to be found, right? Sometimes we say that based on the future, it's sort of like a certain amount of determinism. But we do say Yesh Breira by rabbinic issues, that this is a rabbinic issue. So you could argue that when you find it in the city, that tells you that even on Erev Shabbos, it was findable. But anyway, the emphasis is where was it lost? Yes.
It's like a regular storage place where people normally put it, and at just one time he forgot his key. I mean, in other words, it's a
Yeah, well, there's no distinction between that, whether it's net regular or not regular.
Because normally he would know, well, if I walk a block into the forest or wherever it is, I store this place. Whoever workmen have a place.
Yeah, so it could be that scenario, but it's not limited to that.
What it is,
Right, but it's not limited to that. Okay, so this answer basically says the lenient position of the Chachamim is a very special case of bricks on Yantav, but the general position would be not good. Why? Because even if it were lost in the city, the rabbis might not hold, I did not mention this, even in the case of the lost in the city, the rabbis might not hold, well, you can carry it from one Rosh Hashanah to another, because they might not agree to this position of Rabbi Eliezer that says that they're all considered one type of a Rosh Hashanah. So the rabbis are not impressed with the possibility of finding the key. That doesn't matter for them. And Rabbi Eliezer turns out to actually be a lenient position, as opposed to the mission where he sounds strict. And he says, you know what? If the key was lost in the city and you can get to it by Rosh Hashanah, that's okay.
Even on Shabbat.
Even on Shabbat, right? That's when the carrying is an issue. So that's the answer, that the basic allowance, without the idea of the key being lost in the city, is this case of the thing made out of bricks on Yantiv. Yes?
So let's say you left it outside in the field, in the tree, whatever, and it was fine, Bein Hashmashot, and then you get there on Shabbos, it's eaten, it's gone.
That's no problem, and we're going to actually get to that in the next Mishnah. Okay, as long as it was fine Bein Hashmashot.
Say retroactively, it might have been.
So we're going to discuss that. That's exactly the next Mishnah.
But you had no way of
I know. So that's exactly the next Mishnah. About if you don't know, we'll see that in a few minutes. Okay. So now that's answer number one. Now the Gemara goes on and says like this. Rabbi Rav Yosef Dami Tavai. Now Rabbi Rav Yosef says no. You made that way too complicated. The reason the rabbis are lenient is not this case of bricks on Yantiv. It's your normal wood wardrobe. So why is it considered accessible if you lost the key? Demar savar klihu because one says a wardrobe is like a vessel, and actually there's no problem on Shabbos to build a vessel or to destroy a vessel. It's not considered bona. Now, actually, sometimes when you create a vessel, even if it's not other malachas, it might be maket patish. But it's saying it's not bona, and the relevance of saying it's not bona is that bona has its counterpart of soter. So if you say fundamentally the concept of bona doesn't apply by a vessel, it means you can destroy a vessel and haven't done a malacha. But if the concept of bona applies, then destroying a vessel is soter. Now, it might be makalkel, it might be rabbinic, but anyway, that's why it's critical here, because the question is, can I just break the wardrobe, destroy it, get a hatchet and destroy it? So if you say that the concept of bona doesn't apply by vessels, then destroying doesn't apply by vessels, and it would be actually allowed. Now that might sound crazy to destroy a whole wardrobe, but think about it. When we open packages on Shabbos, we're not just concerned about destroying a container. Now you might say that's not a full vessel, it's only like temporary, disposable, but it's a related concept. The Gemara discusses in Shabbos, breaking a wine barrel to get the wine. Okay, so this position is, it's actually not a problem to destroy a kli.
Really
right, it's to destroy a kli on Shabbos. Now, yes, it's considered accessible in theory, you could know, which is actually quite funny because there's a rabbinic problem about mevato kli mehechano. So you might think that destroying a vessel might be a really good example of mevato kli mehechano. But anyway, that's what the Gemara is saying. So according to the Tanna Kama, you know why you can do it? Because you could just take your hatchet and break into the wardrobe. And that's why so clay. Umar Sava, the other one does is, if it were of kli, I would not disagree with you, you could break it. Like you could break a barrel to get the wine. But here the issue is, oelhu. A wardrobe is not a vessel. It's big enough that, if you think about like that's a wardrobe, like a walk-in type of a big thing, right? It's actually like a structure. It's like a house. Now, it's not permanent. It's, transportable, but halachically it doesn't have the status of a kli. Halachically it has the status of an oel, of a tent, and therefore, it's like a standing tent, as it were, almost. It's got a roof, and roofs are very important. Yes, but roofs are very important in Hilchos Shabbos, because making something with a roof is considered a type of a boneh, even if it's not a whole big house. That's like defined as what's a classic building. It's something with a roof. So that the other opinion is it's not a vessel, and therefore you can't destroy it. And that's what the issue is, and that's why Rabbi Eliezer says if you can't theoretically find the key, it's no good. So now the Gemara says, "Ubeplukta dahani tanai." This question of what is the status of a wardrobe is tied into the same debate as the following debate of Tanayim. That now we taught in the Mishnah, Hikish hagabe hasheda tevo migdal. So this week's Parshas Tazria Mitzora. So this is relevant. This is from Masechet Zavin about a zav who will make something tamei not only if he touches it, but even if he moves it. Okay, I should say again that that's not the normal halacha. The normal halacha is that sometimes you're tamei if you, the Torah person, move the tamei thing. If you move a corpse, even without touching it, you're tamei. Here, the zav is the one who is tamei, so it's the direction is opposite. But the halacha is that if he goes ahead and he, let's say, pushes a vessel, moves a vessel, even with an object, even without touching it, he makes it tamei. Now, what happens if he comes and he's wearing gloves? Rashi actually says he's wearing gloves. gloves, and he comes to this wardrobe and he bangs on top of it, and it like shakes a little bit. Okay, has he made it tamei? Is he considered moving it or not? So let's see what the Mishnah says. He banged on this on a box or on a wardrobe. He made them tamei, even if he didn't touch them. Rabbi Nechemia of Rabbi Shimon mitarim. Rabbi Nechemia and Rabbi Shimon say it's tahor. So the Gemara says, "My love, b'hakmiflagi." Isn't this what they're debating? Mar savar klihu, umar savar oelhu. One says it's a vessel, and you can make vessels tamei, and one says it's an ohel, and presumably you can't make an ohel tamei. So maybe that is exactly what they are debating. Now,
the inside the oil tamei, but the outside, why can't you make tamei?
well, the Gemara is assuming it's sort of identifying here the idea of ohel with there's a category of kalim that are considered to be so big that they're no longer a kli. If something can contain 40 sa'ah, which basically means the size of a volume of a human person. Now, a normal wardrobe can't contain 40 sa'ah, and actually, the halacha, if it really were that big, it would not be able to become tamei, because it doesn't matter that you call it an ohel or don't call it an ohel, it's too big of a kli. But the Gemara is here assuming that if it had the status of an ohel, that would also take it out of kli status and not be able to be tamei. The Gemara is going to reject it. Let's see what the Gemara says. Amar Abaye, says Abaye, V'tisbara, does that really make sense? V'atanya, the Braita clarifies, and it says, ohel, even something that's an ohel, assuming it's not like banged into the ground, it's portable, v'nisat, if it actually was moved by the zav, tamei, it is tamei. So, yes, you can make an ohel tamei, as long as it's not in this category of like 40 sa'ah and so on. Kli, and the flip, if it's a vessel, the ain't nisat, if it's not genuinely moved, tahor, it's tahor. So the Braita makes it very clear that whether it's an ohel or not is not relevant to this question. The Ketani Seifa, and we also teach at the end of that Mishnah that we just quoted, that even Reb Nechemia and Reb Shimon that says this wardrobe is tahor would agree that if you actually moved it, it would be tamei. So we really don't know what their debate is that. Everybody agrees if you actually move it, it's tamei. Everybody agrees it doesn't matter if it's clear or it's an ohel. So what's the whole issue about the wardrobe? So the Mishnah goes on and says, Zeh haklal, this is the rule. Nisat Machmas kocho, if something was moved because of your energy, like you pushed it, through a stick, you didn't touch it, but that's called kocho, then tamei, it's tamei. Machmas ri'ada, if it's because of a tremor, tahor. If you bang on the ground, and that causes, basically, if it's your waves that you created, not through a physical object, but you bang on the ground and the waves cause it to shake and cause the thing to move, that actually, what? Vibrations. I said, well, it's a type of wave. But yes, vibrations, it's tahor, it's not moving. Okay, so if everybody agrees to the principles, it doesn't matter if it's a kli or an ohel. That doesn't matter. Everybody agrees that if it actually got moved, it's tamei. Everybody agrees that it has to be moved directly through your energy and not through vibrations you cause. So what's the debate about this migdal? What are they debating? So Gemara says, Elam Abaye, so Abaye says, I'm going to tell you what they're debating about. Everybody said if it moved because of your energy, like you pushed with the stick, it's tamei. Machmas re'ada, by tremors, tahor. You're tahor. It didn't move because of vibrations. All that happened was that it vibrated. What you did is you took a stick, or you had your hand with gloves, and you banged on the box, and the box shook. But it didn't actually get displaced from its place. It just shook. How do you define I moved it, right? If I caused it to shake, did I move it or not? And that's the debate. This debate, the Marasavar Havi Heset, that if it shakes, it's considered moving. The Marasavar Lo Havi Heset, it's not moving. So basically, Abai says, but the point for us being, nobody debates whether this is considered an ohel or a kli. And the way Rashi says it is, at the end of the day, here's what would make a difference, though the Gemara doesn't say this. If it is, like this category, of something that can contain 40 se'ah, then everybody would agree that it's considered to be a non-kli, and there would be a problem about destroying it. If it's less than 40 se'ah, then everybody would agree it is a kli, and there isn't a problem destroying it. So we're back to our question. Why do the Chachamim say you have access to this? If it's small enough, the wardrobe, the dresser, thank you, then if it's small enough, then you should be able to break it, like you can break the barrel to get the wine. And if it's big enough, then everybody should agree it's not good. So what is the debate around this issue of the thing lost in the wardrobe with the lost kli? Let's just see the Gemara's answer. So it says, The umasnisin b'mayim mukmin Allah. So therefore, what's our Mishnah talking about? And what would be a case that would be debatable? So, so they say the following: Now I'm going to insert Rashi's point. Rashi says, fine, we're talking about a big wardrobe, like a standard wardrobe, which is big, that isn't a kli. And because it's not a kli, you can't break it like you could break the barrel. So what's the issue then? Why do the Chachamim think you have access to it? Because they say, basically, it's like locked with a string. So, we put like a metal chain around something and then attach a lock. So what if you put a string around something and attach a lock? Not quite as good. Okay, but anyway, that's what you did. And the debate is, you don't have the key, but is it accessible? Maybe you could just break the string. So that's exactly the debate. Ubai sakina lemisake, but you need a knife to break the string. Tanakama Savalak Reb Yossi, the Tanakama who says it is accessible, holds like Reb Yossi, that you can basically move all vessels on Shabbos except for like the big saw and the peg used for the plow. Basically, they're not concerned that you can use a vessel, even if litzorech gufo litzorech mikomo. So go ahead and take out your knife and cut the string. Rabbi Eliezer Savalak Reb Nechemia, and Rabbi Eliezer holds like Reb Nechemia. Damar afilu talis afilu tarvad, even like a cloak, even a like a type of a scoop or whatever. They can only be used for their classic use. So since you normally don't use knives for cutting ropes, apparently it's not your hunting knife. You would it's a knife you'd use in the kitchen. You're not allowed to cut it, not because cutting it is a problem. It's a problem. You can't use the knife. So it's pretty funny to say that the debate in the Mishnah is a very special case, and it all gets back to a muktzah question of could you use the knife. It would have been more sense to have said that they're somehow debating whether that's considered to be a type of a breaking of a kli, to cutting the rope or something along those lines, or even whether it's just the fact about physical inaccessibility enough to create a problem. But this is the way the Gemara makes the case. So just to review, the Gemara assumes, why is it considered accessible? Assuming it's in this wood wardrobe, and the Gemara's answer is basically, if it's not a kli, if it's a kli, it's small enough to be considered a kli, then presumably everybody would agree it's accessible. You just break it like we open package.
Even if you don't want to break it.
Even if you don't want to, but you could. The same way you could break the wine barrel to get to the wine, and we could open packages to get to stuff. I'm not talking about what happens when you open them, you make it into a kli, but if it's completely destructive. As so it says, so the way Rashi understands, we're talking that it's big, so big that it can't be considered a kli. Therefore, you can't just break it. That would be considered soter. But what you can do is you can cut the rope. Then you're not breaking the actual thing. You're just cutting the rope. And the rope isn't considered a malacha. That's not soter. And therefore, the only question is, can you use the knife that's needed to cut the rope? A very special case. I would just mention, and parenthetically, that Tosfos feels that there can be cases of soter even by kalim. And Tosfos says that this last case is not only talking about a big thing, it's even talking about a small thing. According to Tosfos, there is a problem of destroying whole kalim. So that's relevant for things like opening packages and whatnot. Yes, Michael.
But to me, I don't understand how we're conflating the two. Like, your packages are meant to be opened. Wine caskets are meant to be opened. So that's basically isn't meant to be destroyed. Okay, so that's along the lines of what Tosfos says, and therefore Tosfos says that even a smaller one would be a problem. You can't destroy it. Which is why the Gemara has to be talking that the issue is about cutting the rope. Okay, now we go on. That according to Tosfos, then, if it wasn't bound with a rope, then it would be a problem, and that's not what they're debating then.
Right. According to Tosfos, if it's really a full kli, and I won't go into the specifics of Tosfos, but along the lines you say, Tosfos might not have a problem of opening packaging, which is made to be destroyed, but something that's a real full kli, according to Tosfos, actually would be soter b'kalim if you would really destroy it. Right. So let's take a look now at the next Mishnah, which gets to Rivka's case. Nisgalgel, Nisgalgel chutz l'tchum. So let's say, before Shabbos began, the Eruv rolled outside of the Tchum, because it has to be within the Tchum to extend your Tchum. You started at point X, it was at X plus 2000. If it rolls out, so it's now X plus 2001, it started outside of your Tchum, so you can't go ahead and build on it and extend it. Nafal alav gal o nisraf. Now let's say a building fell on it, or it was burnt, or truma v'nitmes, it was truma and became tamei, and nobody can eat tamei truma. So if it happened, mi ba'od yom. So by the way, Rivka, a variation of nisraf would be an animal ate it. Okay, it got destroyed. If it happened, mi ba'od yom, while it was still Friday, ain't no eruv. It's not good. If it happened when it was dark, hareza eruv. Now, then it is the eruv. Im safek, if you don't know, maybe there were other people around and they told you. It's hard to imagine how you would know. But first, let's get the parameters clear. If it happened on Friday, good. Happened once Shabbos began, no good. Let's say you don't know, which would probably be most cases. So there, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda Omrim, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda say, Hareza Chamar Gamal. That is a donkey driver, camel leader. Which, what does that mean? It's a nice little idiomatic phrase. It makes me think of, does anybody remember Dr. Doolittle and the push me, pull you? Yeah. So that's exactly what this is. It's a push me, pull you, because apparently a donkey driver, you go behind the donkey and you drive it to go forward. A camel, you hold on to the rope and you lead the camel. So imagine you're standing in front of your camel and donkey and you're trying to get them to move. So one of them, you have to one of them, or you're standing behind you're standing behind your donkey and in front of your camel. So leading your camel would pull you in this direction. Getting your donkey to move would pull you in that direction. So you're being pulled in opposite directions. And what that means is the following. It means that
two residences.
Right, exactly. If this is point A, is where you start, and you have, if you didn't make an Eruv, you have 2,000 amot in every direction. You made your Eruv here, okay, at point B, which should allow you to get to 4,000. But what it does is, if the Eruv is good, you can't go south, right? Because the whole point is, it's like you started here. So what you gain in the north direction, you lose in the south. That's classic by a normal case of an Eruv. Now, you don't know whether it worked. So if it worked, you would be allowed to travel in this area. If it didn't work, you'd be allowed to travel this area, right? So you're being pulled in opposite direction. If it works, you can go further north. If it didn't work, you can go further south. So because you don't know, you can't travel here, and you can't travel here, and you can only travel 2,000 amot north. You can't go 4,000 north. You can't go 2,000 south. You're being pulled in opposite directions, and you can only go 2,000 amot north. That's what the Chachamim say. And then it says that Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, and then it goes on to say Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon say Safek Eruv kosher. This is rabbinic. So if there's a doubt, we'll be lenient and we'll assume it was good. Now the Gemara will also discuss it's not just that it's a Safek. There's also a concept of chazaka here. That since it was good Erev Shabbos, you assume when you don't know otherwise that the status remained true even during the doubtful time. So it remained the way you left it, and you can rely on it, and it's kosher. Amr Reb Yossi said, Reb Yossi, Avtulmis Heid Mishum Chamisha Zakenim, Avtulmis testify in the name of 5 Zakenim, elders, Al Safek Erev Shekosher. So we have a testimony going way back that a doubtful Erev is kosher, and this case is kosher. Yes.
So did you really get 2,004 amot? Because if I'm calling my uncle...
Fine, the Gemara is going to say that. So if it rolled outside the tchum, and here's exactly what Michael said, and we quoted this before. Amar Rava, says Rava, we actually give you an extra 4 amot. So when it rolls outside from 2,000, it's not going to 2,001. It would be going to 2,005. As long as it rolled within 4 amot, when you put your Eruv here, it's like this is your house, and like you have a house that is 4 amot in each direction. And therefore, that's all considered, any place within a house is all considered to take up no halachic space. So even up to 4 amot, it's still in the same space, and therefore it is not a problem. We quoted that before, and here's what was originally said. Yes?
I just want to understand. You put it down, you assume it's there. On Shabbos, you walk.
Right.
You get there and it's not there.
Right. So according to Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, who are strict, they say turn around and go home. You can't go any further. And according to Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, they say, okay, you don't know, but you can assume it was fine, and therefore you can keep on going. So that's exactly. What's the halacha? That's a good question. I didn't check, but I believe we actually say that it's okay. But you know what? I don't. I have to double check. Yes.
But I can only do one eruv, right? I can't then put another one.
Right.
2,000 more away from that.
Yeah, you have to start Shabbos in one place.
No, even if I have two houses, and let's say I have two houses, and I want to be in both of them over the course of Shabbat.
No, you can't do an Eruv for Chatzi Shabbat. Okay, so now the Gemara says, okay, Kasal Kedaitich, so now we get to the idea that Nafalav, that it got destroyed. We're not yet up to the Safek case, just the fact that a building fell on it. Kasal Kedaitich Dibatim Bai Matzi Shakile. So we're assuming that the case would be that, yes, it's got some rubble on it, but there's nothing halachically preventing you from getting at it. You move aside the rubble, it's only stones, it's muktzah, but as we know, drabbanans might not be an issue. So the Gemara says, Lema Masnisin lo karebi. But if the Mishnah says that it's considered inaccessible with stones on it, that sounds like it's against Rebbe, because the only problem here is a rabbinic one of muktzah. The Ik Rebbe, and if it was like Rebbe, he wouldn't be bothered by stones. So it's only rabbinic of muktzah. So why does the Mishnah assume with stones on it it's no good? Is it saying against Rebbe? So the Gemara says no. A few tema Rebbe, it could be going like Rebbe, and it would have to be a D'oraisa problem. So what's the D'oraisa problem with stones on top of it? So lo tzricha, you need it for the case the by mar v'chatzina, that you need. The only way you can get to the eruv is with like a shovel and a hoe. Okay, you can't just pick off stones. And therefore, it is a biblical problem. Now, what biblical problem is it? Uncovering rubble with a shovel and a hoe. So, by the way, I should tell you that a classic example about Chilul Shabbos for Pikuach Nefesh is a building falls on somebody. And the discussion is, can you uncover him in order, for Pikuach Nefesh? I mean, you can uncover him and so on. But anyway, that's the classic scenario. So, why is that even a good example? Where's the biblical prohibition? So the Gemara says here, well, if you need a shovel, it's biblical. Why is it biblical? So the Ritva and other Rishonim say that then it would be considered to be, you can't do basically types of changing of the landscape. If you change the landscape in like in a house, it could be a type of a bona, because now you've improved the floor of your house or you've improved your front yard. If you change the landscape out in a field, it could be a choresh. It's preparing the ground for planting. Now, there could be a lot of scenarios like, it's not your field, you don't care about whether it's preparing. Maybe it's not even a field that's fit for planting, but that's what the Gemara is assuming, at least that some of those cases could fall into the ambit of a real malacha, and that's why it would be an issue. V'tzricha, and you need to tell me all the scenarios in the Mishnah. If it had just said rolling out, I would say, okay, that I understand that no good. Mishum delay se gabe. It's no longer, by you. It's not even accessible. Aval nafal of gal, but if it's rubble is on it, disa gabe. Okay, it's right next to me. It's in the same space. I just can't get to it. Maybe that would be good. Maybe that was also like the idea, possibly was discussed before about being in the wardrobe. It's right there. I just can't get to it. Maybe that would be good. Vitan nafal of gal. If it just had that case and said that was no good, mishum de mirsi. That's because it's not visible and it's covered, so it really is like it no longer exists. But if it rolled, so you see it, I see it, it's right there. Zimnim to asizika. Not only that, sometimes the wind can come. Umaisilan, blow it back. So maybe that should be good. So Emel have air, maybe we good tzricha. So not that there's a huge havamin in either of these directions, but it's just trying to explain why we gave a couple of scenarios. So you should understand that however it is inaccessible doesn't matter, and it is not an eruv. Okay, so now, nisraf truma v'nitnes. Nisraf, or it was burned and truma v'nitnes, or truma became tameh. So the Gemara says, why do you need those scenarios? Lamali. So why do you need that? Tana nisraf lo dicho kocho to Rabbi Yossi, the top of Lamed Hamad Bet. It tells nisraf to tell me the power of Rabbi Yossi's position. What's the power of Rabbi Yossi's position? Meaning that Rabbi Yossi, who says that if it's a suffix, you can assume it's good, is even in an extreme case where it got completely destroyed. So you might say, if it's still here, I could assume it was here in the right way before Shabbos began. When Shabbos began, maybe destroyed, I already have to follow it. No, Rabbi Yossi would say you can assume it's good good even if it's been completely destroyed. Tana Truma v'nidmes, and Truma is perhaps the least change. It's physically here, it's in front of you, you can touch it, it's just that its halachic status changed. So that case you might say more people should agree, there should be more consensus that you could assume remained okay. So no, that's lo dicho kochad Rabbi Meir to tell you that when Rabbi Meir says no good, it's even in that case. So why do we give all these cases? To tell you the position that Rabbi Yossi, that it's good, if there's a suffix, you can assume it's good, is even if now it's completely destroyed. And the position of Rabbi Meir that says if it's a suffix, you have to assume you're in this doubtful case, and it's the worst of both scenarios. You have to live with the suffix, is even in a case when it's physically present, and the only question is whether its halachic status changed. Okay, and now we're going to get on to the core of the Mishnah, which is this debate of when you have the doubt, can you assume like Rabbi Yossi that it was good and keep on going 4,000 to the north, or do you have to assume like Rabbi Meir that you don't know if it was good or not, and therefore you can only go 2,000 to the south. You can't go beyond the Eruv, and you also can't go only 2,000 to the north. You can't go beyond the Eruv, and you can't go in the opposite direction either.
Find it is actually in an edible state. I mean, there's too much meat. Can it be burnt? You can still get enough from it, right?
Yeah, but it's not edible. It has to be roy lachila.
Oh no. So okay. So in the case of a then we're not talking about that it got squished, right?
You're right.
It was a fruit.
You could have said that it so much fell on it that it's not edible. That's a good point. You could have said that. Okay, so now let's get to this issue of this debate of what we have to deal with in the case of suffix. So the Gemara says like this. The son of Rabbi Meir is fake alachumah. Does Rabbi Meir really say that if you have a doubt, you have to be strict? Especially, as we're going to see, the question is that this is only rabbinic. So we should maybe be lenient in a case of doubt. The Hatzana, we taught in the Mishnah. Tamei sheyarad litvo. Somebody Tamei went to go to the mikvah. Suffix tavel, suffix lo tavel. He's not sure if he went to the mikvah or not. He doesn't remember. That happens to me sometimes. I don't even know what I was doing the last hour. Anyway, okay. Vafilu taval, maybe it means he had a suffix. Even if he knows he dunked in the mikvah, suffix tavel bar brahim sav, suffix lo tavel bar brahim sav. He's not sure the mikvah was full. It had 40 sa on it. It was kosher. Or v'chein shnei mikvahs. Let's say there were two mikvahs. B'achas yesh bar brahim sav, b'achas ein bar brahim sav. One is kosher and one isn't kosher. V'tavel b'achas man, and you went into one of them. V'leinu yodei be'ezim tavel, and you don't know which one you went into. So all these cases, you don't know if you became tahor now or not. So the halach is sfeiko tamei. You have to assume that you're tamei, which makes sense. You were tamei before, and you don't know if you became tahor, so you assume to remain tamei. When is this true? The tuma chamura, when it's a strict tuma, meaning a biblical tuma. Aval b'tuma kala, if it's a light one, meaning a rabbinic tuma, kigon. And now, what are examples of this? This is from the list of the 18 things of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. She'achol ochlim tmeim. You ate tamei food. Food normally tamei food cannot be metamei a person, but if you eat it, the rabbi said you could become tamei. Or similarly, v'shasam mashkim tmeim. You drank tamei liquids. So again, touching them would not make you tamei, but rabbinically drinking it makes you tamei. Or if you basically immersed yourself in drawn water, that was a rabbinic tumah because they didn't want people basically bathing after the mikvah and saying that it was the bathing that made them tahor. A similar issue about taking a shower. They didn't want them doing it right after going to the mikvah. So if you did, and if drawn water, three log of drawn water fell on your head, you showered with it essentially, then you're also tamei. All of those are pure rabbinic tumahs. So if that was your tumah, in that case, if you yarad litvo and you went down to go to the mikvah, suffix tavel, suffix lo tavel, you didn't know if you went. Vafilu tavel, even if you've definitely dunked, suffix tavel bar barim suffix lo tavel barim. You don't know if the mikvah had 40 sa'ah in it or not. Or v'chein shnei mikvaos, or if there were two mikvaos. Ba'achas yesh ben arba'im sa'ah, ba'achas ein arba'im sa'ah. One had 40 sa'ah, one didn't. One was kosher, one wasn't. V'tavel ba'achas man, you went into one of them and you did bezim tavel. You don't know which one. Sfeiko tahor. Therefore, by the doubt you're tahor. So the upshot of all of this is that by a rabbinic tumah, we say if you're suffik, you're tahor. Then we assume a stam mishnah is Rabbi Meir. And this case is even more strict than the Mishnah, because this case you knew you began being tamei, and even though your original status was tamei, we assume if it's a suffix will be lenient. So certainly in our Mishnah we should assume when you put it there in a good way before Shabbos, why isn't Rabbi Meir similarly lenient? That's the Gemara's question. By the way, this Mishnah ends Rabbi Yossi mitamei. Rabbi Yossi says in that mikvah case you are tamei. So Rabbi Yossi also seems a contradiction. He's lenient in our Mishnah, and in this case case of doubt, he's strict. So we'll worry about Rabbi Yossi in a minute, but now we're going to focus on Rabbi Meir. How come Rabbi Meir is strict in our Mishnah and lenient by the Tumah? So the Gemara's answer is,
what?
Yes?
Why can you say there's a contradiction? Or one's talking about Tumah and Tara, and one's talking about what?
So that's always an answer. Maybe there's reasons why Tumah V'Tara is more lenient, and it's worth mentioning that there's a general principle that Suffolk Tumah B'Rishus Harabim is Tahor, and that might be more than normally other cases. There might be a special idea that we are particularly lenient in Rishus Harabim, and if you assume that's the scenario, maybe that's what's going on. So you're absolutely right. The Gemara could have answered that. Could have said Tumah is different, because it has special rules that allow for more leniency. The Gemara will make a difference, but by emphasizing the difference of Tchumim, not the difference of Tumah. But you're right, given rules of Suffolk Tumah B'Rishus Harabim, it's interesting the Gemara did not go there. So let's see what the Gemara's answer is. Kasavar Rabbi Meir is of the opinion, Tchumim D'Oraisa Ninhu, Tchumim are biblical. The reason Rabbi Meir is strict in our Mishnah is if we're rabbinic, he'd be lenient, but he's strict in our Mishnah because he feels that Tchum is biblical. So the Gemara says, V'sara Reb Meir, Tchumim D'Oraisa? Does Reb Meir really hold Tchumim D'Oraisa? That's not. We taught in the Mishnah. Im yochel lav leo b'zo amar Reb Dos Reb Yana mishum Reb Im ein yochel lav leo. If you can't swallow it, I'll tell you what that means in a minute. B'zo in this case, amar Reb Dos Tad Reb Yana mishum Reb Meir. Reb Dos Tad Reb Yana said the name of Reb Meir. Shamachi shemekadrin baharim. I have heard that you pierce through mountains. What does that mean? When you measure the 2,000 amot, you measure it as the bird flies or as the dog walks. So you measure it as the bird flies.
So there's a mountain.
Okay, so here's here, and here's your mountain, and da da da. So basically you measure it straight through the mountain as the bird flies. Now, how would you measure straight through the mountain, right? I mean, how do you do that? How do you measure that? So the halacha is that you use, for whatever reason, this is the halacha, 50 amma measuring strings. Okay? So if the mountain is less than 50 amos wide, 49 amot, so you can do it. You just move aside. One person stands here, one person stands here, right? And you have your 50 amma string, and then you move back up here and you mark where your 50 amma string ended, and you continue going straight. So that's called yochel lahavlio. You can swallow the hill with your 50 amma string. So by moving aside and doing the measuring and then moving back, you've measured your 50 amma unit.
And then you can hike up a whole mountain back and continue.
Yes, and then when you're walking on Shabbos, you can do this because you do it as the bird flies. Which, by the way, it makes it so much easier to paskin halachas of Eiruvin. You just look at a map and you measure. You don't have to worry about the topography. Okay. Now, what if it's eino yochel lahavlio? What if this was 100 amot? So you can't swallow it. Now you could say, who cares if you can't swallow it? Just do multiple things, and you mark this, and then you continue. For whatever reason, the halacha is that if you can't swallow it, then we might have to go measure by going up and down the mountain and so on. Now, but even when you do that, the idea of mekadrin baharim, again, it's very strange why, let's just acknowledge there are alternative ways of doing this. Okay, but anyway, mekadrin baharim means you're going to walk up and down the mountain to measure, but you're still going to try to be measuring the horizontal. And how would you do that? You use a 4 amma string. One person stands here, the other person stands here, okay, and this guy holds the string by his chest, and this guy holds it by his feet. So if it's, based on the slope, you're going to get a measurement, and you continue that all the way up. So you're going to get a measurement that is more horizontal. It's not completely the slope. Depending on the slope, it might be mostly horizontal, or it might be a lot of vertical in there, and you do that multiple times in order to measure the distance if this is more than 50 amot. Okay, why you have to do it that way, I don't know. Why don't you use a bigger string? I don't know. But that's the halacha. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So let's see how this is relevant for our issue right now. Okay, so Rabbi, so if you cannot swallow it in the 50 amma string, so then in the name of Rabbi Meir, we say you try to pierce through the mountain. Okay, which means you do this other way where you still try to do it as the bird flies, but in a more complicated way. So now the Gemara says, why is that a problem? Because if you think tchumim are biblical, we would not allow piercing the mountain for biblical measurements. How do you know that? Rav Nachman says the name of Rabbi Barvua. Ein mekadrin, you do not pierce through mountains. Lo ba'ari miklat, not by cities of refuge, because cities of refuge would have the area directly around them would also be collate. So even if you didn't get into the city gates, even if you were just in the immediate sort of buffer zone, it would also absorb you. And to measure, and basically the 2,000 amot outside the city. So to measure the 2,000 amot outside the city, you do not go as the bird flies. You would actually have to measure the actual way in which it would take you to walk. The actual, so you get a lot less distance for if it's hilly, right, or if it's not flat. Okay, so there you do not measure as the bird flies, and also v'lo b'eglarufa. By eglarufa you measure which is the closest city, and you do not do it as the bird flies. You do it as it actually would take you to walk on the ground. So what's the principle? The Gemara says it seems that the principle is that for biblical halachot we actually go by as the dog walks, not as the bird flies. So how could it be that Rabbi Meir says by tchumim you go as the bird flies? It must be that tchumim is rabbinic. So we've got this problem. Rabbi Meir, it seems, if he allows as the bird flies, must be saying that it's rabbinic. So the Gemara says, and the Gemara accepts that argument. It assumes that the principle of one applies to the other, and if it's true for Ari Miklat and true for Eglarufa, it would be true for tchumim if it were biblical. And because the Mishnah ends by saying, or not to mention whatever, the quote ends by saying, Mipnei Shehin Shel Torah. The reason you do not do it as the bird flies is because they are biblical. So if Rabbi Meir allows as the bird flies, it must be that it is rabbinic. So the Gemara says, no, I'll get out of it. Lo kasha, it's not difficult. Hadidei, hadarabe. One is his Rebbe's, meaning when Rabbi Meir says in the Mishnah, right? Rabbi Meir is strict in the Mishnah. Rabbi Meir is strict in the Mishnah. What does the Mishnah say? It says, right? He's strict in the Mishnah, but in this case of, where are we? 1 minute, excuse me. 1 minute.
It says Shamati.
Shamati Shemakadin Baharim. Right, thank you. The case where Rabbi Meir says, yes, thank you. So where Rabbi Meir says you do as the bird flies, which we're trying to prove means that he thinks it's rabbinic, that was not in his own name. Okay, Dikanami, and that also is inferred from the language, Diktani, because it says there, by as the bird flies, Bizo Amar Reb Dustai Reb Yanai Mishum Rabbi Meir. So Reb Dustai said in the name of Rabbi Meir, that what did Rabbi Meir say? Rabbi Meir said, Shamati Shemakadin Baharim. I have a tradition. It's not necessarily my own opinion. So you see that you don't have to lock him into that position. Shma mina. That's a good position. So meaning, how does the Gemara reconciled it? Right now we have Rabbi Meir strict in our Mishnah by Tchumim, lenient by Tumah. If anything, first of all, you have the answer that may be lenient by Tumah because Safik Tumah is just a rabbin. But bracketing that, if anything, you should be more strict by Tumah because the guy started as being Tomei. Why are you strict in the Mishnah, lenient by Tumah? And the answer is, Rabbi Meir holds that Tchumim are Dioraisa, and that's why he is strict. And we're strict by Tumah when it's Dioraisa as well. How about this idea of measuring as the bird flies, which you only do by Durabanans? No, Rabbi Meir actually, he's only quoting his Rebbe who says you measure as the bird fly. Right. Well, that's a good point. Anyway, so according to whatever tradition he heard, you do as the bird flies. But Rabbi Meir personally holds Tchumim Doraisa and would not measure as the bird flies. That's the Gemara's way of dealing with Rabbi Meir. But now we're not done. For Ramis, to Rabbi Meir, Doraisa. We'll show the Rabbi Meir. I'll show you that Rabbi Meir is not consistent even in Doraisas. You're trying to say Rabbi Meir says we're strict by Doraisas. That would be the Tumah case if it's biblical. That would be the Mishnah of Tchumim Doraisa. I'm going to show you he's not consistent even by Doraisas. Ditnan, we turn in the Mishnah. Nogad be'echad b'layla. Somebody touched a person at night. Okay, you went and you shook a person or put your hand on the person. And you don't know that he was necessarily living at that time. It was a sick person. They were, at their last stage of life. You touched them. And in the morning you saw that he had passed away sometime. Who knows what you did? But in the morning you see he had passed away sometime in the night. And you don't know if you touched him before or after he passed away. Are you tamei or not? So Rabbi Meir b'taher. Rabbi Meir says you're tahor. V'chachamim b'tamei. The chachamim say you're tamei. Why? Shekol tumas kishas mitziatan. We have a rule by tumah which is you go by what the current state is. If right now the thing is tameh, then you assume that when you touched it, it was tameh. You have to take the current status of tumah and assume backwards. So that's the Chachamim position. But we're interested in Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is lenient by tumah, and this is a D'oraisa case. So why is he strict by tumah in the mikveh case and lenient by tumah in the touching case? So there's an obvious answer we will see. I'm a Rabbi Yirmiyah. So Rabbi Yirmiyah said, "Mishnatenu shaya le'asheretz kol bein hashmashas." You're right. Maybe Rabbi Meir sometimes is lenient by D'oraisas, but our case in the Mishnah, where he's being strict by Tchumim, is that it wasn't really a suffix, that the dead rodent was on the truma the entire period of Shabbos coming in. And that's why he's strict. Of course, if that's true, why would anybody be lenient? So the Gemara says it's not a suffix anymore. You said it was on it the whole time. Yihachi, if that's true, says the Gemara, Bahal Lema Reb Yossi, suffix Erev kosher? So how could Reb Yossi therefore say it's kosher? You can't say that. We still got a problem, okay? It can't be that it was definite. So Rabbi Reb Yosef Ta'ami Tavayu, so Rabbi and Reb Yosef say, no. Here's the case. Maybe Rabbi Meir sometimes is lenient even by D'oraisas. Why is he strict in the Mishnah? Here's the case. We're dealing with two contradictory witnesses. Sets of witnesses. One set of witnesses say, Mibod Yom Nitma'a. It was Tameh before Shabbos began. And the other said, Mishechashecha, and that it was when it was dark. So what's the Gemara's basic answer? The Gemara's answer is like this. When you have, here's how the Gemara lines up the cases. There are three cases in the Gemara. There's the case of not knowing whether the mikvah was kosher. And there Rabbi Meir says, by D'oraita, we're strict. There it's easy to understand why we're strict if you don't know, because the status you began with was that you began being tameh. Okay, so that's easy. You can keep your current status. But in our Mishnah, it began being okay. Similar to the guy in the bed, he began being alive. Okay, so those are comparable. Forget the Tumah case; that's not relevant. That's when it started being bad. But in our Mishnah and the guy in bed, those both started in being in the good state. And in one, the Mishnah, the Tchumim case, Reb Meir says you have to assume the worst. And in the guy dying sometime in the middle of the night, Rabbi Meir says you can be lenient. So that's the question, how to deal with those two cases. So the Gemara's answer is, here's what undermined the fact that you knew it started good in the case of our Mishnah. That there's actually witnesses that said it was bad. Now, if it was just witnesses, there wouldn't be a debate, so they're contradictory witnesses. But the fact that there exists one set of witnesses that says it was bad, that undermines the chazakah, undermines the fact that you knew it started good. So now we have three scenarios. If it started bad, and it's a d'oraisa, you have to assume it remained bad. If it started good, and even in a d'oraisa, like the guy in bed, you could assume it remained good. But if it started good, like the case of Tchumim, but a special case that there are witnesses that said it was no good, even if it's contradictory witnesses, that undermines the status, and therefore it's no good. Right, that's what Rabbi Meir's position would be. Okay, so that's pretty complicated. Let's see another answer to this. Rav Amar, we'll just read a little bit more, top of Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. Rav says, Hosam trei chazaki l'kula, v'achachara chazaka l'kula. No. It's easy. It's 2 versus 1. In our Mishnah, you have one chazaka of a good status, that the food was where it needed to be before Shabbos began. Okay, but it's a d'oraisa, and then you don't know what had happened. Can you assume it retained that status or not? Rabbi Meir is strict. Okay, you don't allow the chazaka to override the fact that now you know it's not good. Why is he lenient by touching the dead person who winds up dead? He says you have 2 chazakas. A, the guy started being alive before night, and B, what's your other chazaka? You started being tahor. Yeah. So when you have 2 chazakas, then you can rely on it. But only one you cannot. By the way, Rabbanan disagree. Now, by the way, this is a classic question in halachas of dealing with doubt, which is we normally have a principle: you go by chazaka, status quo, and we assume the status quo remains. But what if you know that at a certain point it stopped? It's a chazaka versus like the fact that here it was already itra chazaka. There was like a chazaka dahashta. You have a current state. You had a chazaka de meikara, the past state that you know, but you have a chazaka dahashta. You have the current state, and they're competing. Do you assume the good state remained, or do you assume the bad state started earlier? So Rabbi Meir would normally say, I'd normally be lenient. I normally would be strict. Actually, that's the case of our Mishnah. You don't know if the Erev remained there or didn't remain there, and now it's no good. And again, the Gemara is assuming it's D'Oraisa. So Rabbi Meir says, I'm going to be strict. But if you have a double chazaka, if not only was the guy alive, but you were tahor, there Rabbi Meir says that you can be lenient, and we'll continue with that tomorrow. I just have to tell you, this idea of, if I got two chazakas, reminds me of this joke that there was this actuary that would never go fly on a plane because he had figured out the odds of somebody carrying a bomb on a plane, and he was always like so anxious, and he was miserable, and like even if he'd have to fly, he would be sweating the whole time. Then once he was traveling with his friend, and he was like cool as a cucumber, totally calm. Because I said, "What happened? Why are you so calm?" He says, "This time I brought a bomb on the plane. Think about the odds of there being two bombs." So anyway, all right, whatever.
Don't tell that joke in the airport.
Right.